presenters, Bryan Wilkerson and Garrett Durland. They are presenting to us from Tennessee. So they are both professors at the Roane State in Tennessee, and I think I've already forgotten the campus. Sorry, my memory is very short. But we're super excited to see their presentation. I first ran across Bryan when I was on Instagram and saw his super cool Goon mugs. I just absolutely love them and all your little faces. And quite honestly, you have some of the most entertaining videos I've ever seen, Bryan. So whether you're talking clay or not, so that's great. And then he recruited Garrett, so that is super excited. So we get to hear about 3D printing clay today, and hopefully you got a chance to see some of the pictures that we put in the newsletter and on the website. And if you haven't, please make sure you follow their Instagram or check out their Instagram for their products, because it's both of their pieces, or both of their products are absolutely gorgeous. So without further ado, I'm turning it over to our guest speakers, who both have amazing accents too, I think. So to Bryan and Garrett, thank you. Oh, and I'm sorry, I just want to say, we'll monitor the chat, as Gabrielle said. We'll monitor the chat, but you are welcome to take yourself off mute and ask questions as Bryan and Garrett go along, but you can also put it in the chat and I'll monitor that to ask. So, all right, thank you. Over to you guys.
All right, great. Good morning. My name is Bryan Wilkerson. I am a professor of art here at Roane State Community College. My focus has been on clay, but I had started down a different path. And so image making, technology, those have always been a big influence in my work, and I've used those tools and continue to do so. I'm going to introduce Garrett here in just a second, and a colleague of mine actually introduced me to Garrett. Gosh, it's been a while back that I knew about him through the internet, and then we finally got a chance to meet and start working together, and became fast friends. And I'll let him talk more about himself here in just a second during his introduction. And he and I together are going to walk you through over the next hour and a half, from start to finish, from going to making a model on the computer and giving you some resources on being able to do that yourself, to printing a finished thing that you would put in the kiln. Let's see. And I'll talk more a little bit about myself at the end when I talk about the Goon, so I don't want to go over too much right now, but I'm going to let Garrett introduce himself real quick, and then we'll go back to me, and I'll take you into modeling a form on the computer and show you how you could jump right into that yourself. So Garrett, if you want to real quickly.
Hi, my name is Garrett Durland. I'm a engineer from Colorado. I moved here to work at the Oak Ridge National Lab. And as I was doing that, I started 3D printing, and I started doing bathroom signs. So that was a little niche that I could find that showed that I had a project that people wanted, and I kept doing that. And I still have the Etsy shop today, but I became more interested in doing clay. So the clay is it's obviously harder than printing plastic, because you got the firing steps to do and the glazing, which is totally different than what I had done before. So as I was doing the 3D printing, I became a member of the Tinkercad advisory team. Here's my Tinkercad shirt. And so I'm like a user / advisor on how to use that program. So I'm looking forward to teaching you how to use that. And right now I just built a 3D printer for clay from the ground up, based on a plastic 3D printer that I converted. So that's one of my strong points, is the building of machines, and I'd like to do some more of that in the future.
Okay. All right, I'm going to do a screen share now, and I will, I'm going to introduce you to Tinkercad, and that's the first program I'm going to show you. And this is a very educational friendly and user friendly program. And it's simple enough that it's very intuitive to where anyone can begin to use it, but it has enough flexibility where even if you were an advanced modeler, you could do some really impressive things. We want to use it as ceramic artists, or I'm going to focus on using it as a ceramic artist, you could use it in a number of different ways. So let me pull up Tinkercad, and I'm going to walk you through creating a model. And it's absolutely free, this program. And I'm going to walk you through, and if you want to learn this program, and I've only been using Tinkercad now for really just less than a year, but I've been using 3D modeling programs for a long time, and I switched to this one when we went to a distant learning because it's absolutely free. My students can download it and use it. It's web-based, and plus it has a very short learning curve, I think, to be able to understand and use this. If you wanted to learn this program, you can log in and create your own free Tinkercad account. And if you come over to, there's all kinds of lessons plans if you wanted to incorporate this as an educator that are built in. So there's all kinds of tools already in the program that are there to help you teach it. Once you get ready, we're going to, this is what I'm going to show you that we kind of have started. If you look over on my camera on my phone, I have it updating, and we started a print earlier, but I'm going to kind of walk you through creating this model, creating a new design. And so when you go into Tinkercad and create a new design, and I'm going to create just using, you can see over on your right, the building blocks that you can use. And if you think about taking these and stacking them, arranging them, and reorganizing them, you can, this is how you can create your form. And so the one that we just looked at that's printing right now, I started with just a cylinder, and you simply click and you drag that over into your work plane. When we talk about the 3D world of 3D modeling, everything is on an X, Y, and Z axis. Those are your three axes. The Z axis is the up and down, and then X, and then Y. You can navigate through here by just right-clicking on your mouse. And I'm working on a Mac, just a laptop that it'll work on a PC, and it's through your browser. You don't even have to download this program. You can operate it through your web browser. So if you have some, you know, I try to teach this from the that you have no experience with the computer. My students typically do at this point have something either in Photoshop or 3D modeling, or even in gaming. I find that people who do 3D gaming kind of adapt to this environment pretty quickly and understand how to get around. So I'm going to increase the scale of this, and you'll notice too, and this is true for just most graphic applications, as I start to stretch this and grab this corner handle, it's going to, if you hold down Shift, it's going to constrain the proportions on that.
Hey, Brian, we have our first question about if you don't have a 3D printer, can you use this program that you're showing us to design it and then send it to a company to either print on your behalf, or can you print in plastic and then make a mold out of it? Have you guys done that?
Yeah, I certainly have. I have been printing in plastic a lot longer than I have in clay, and had a lot more experience doing that first. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of applications. Even if you just never wanted to print, I think this is a great tool for students or artists to be able to just conceptualize form, and to build things rapidly and see how they're going to work before you execute them in a material. But as far as like, there are companies that you can send stuff off. I don't know of one that's specifically ceramic yet. Do you know one that you can send your model to and print?
A slicer? What do you mean? Oh,
If you have a ceramic object.
yeah, you do. Shapeways, for instance.
Yeah, that's the one that I know of. So, but it's not, they do, Shapeways will print everything, and they can do precious metals. They can do, like if you were a jewelry maker. So there are, Shapeways is probably the biggest company that does that, offers that service.
There are some more out there.
Yeah. So Garrett and I are interested in doing something very similar to that very thing, because it's if you're not in an institution and you're just wanting to get your feet wet, and there are a lot of maker spaces around also, so you may want to look in your area and see if there's not just a community operated place that you can go and work or pay a subscription fee, so you don't have to invest, because the printers, but it's all becoming more affordable.
So that question was from Carly, and Carly, if you move that way with all of your stuff, I totally want to hear about it. I think that'd be great to see how you move your stuff into like a 3D printing world. So there is a note that the Paradise Valley Community College has a clay 3D printer.
Yeah, and I mean, my feelings on this is it's going to just, the availability of it and the technology itself will continue to just rapidly, at a very rapid rate, increase, get better. I always like to use with my students the analogy of video games, and having grown up with an Atari 2600 kind of as my first experience, which I hope many of you remember that. If I think about that game and then I compare it just in my time of interacting with games to what my son plays now, who's 13, and that's the graphics and the rate of which that, I think 3D printing will kind of follow that suit. So we're still, I feel like, at least at the beginning of that. And so I think it'll be, I'm excited to see how that's going to evolve and change. So back to this model, I want to continue to edit this, and I'm going to add some spheres and show you how to do that. There's lots of different shapes that you can add to this, and I'm going to start by just to give the outside of this cylinder some texture form. And I've already modeled this once before the class, and we have it printed over there on the side. And so we want to repeat this on the surface, and I'm going to hold down Option and just drag, and this is dragging a copy. And that works in Photoshop, Illustrator, or Alt on a PC. A lot of these things are kind of universal computer things if you start to work in graphics programs or 3D modeling programs. There are things to help you align. There are align tools.
So did you just group those two together?
Yep. So in order to make these two spheres one object, I've selected both of them, and then I've clicked on this group. So now it will treat these as if it was one thing. I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to use my align to align both of these really quickly. Along both you can see both axes. So if I go and navigate around and look at this. Now, let's see, I can take these spheres now that I have them, and I'm going to duplicate them all the way around this object. So the Command D will duplicate. And again, these are things I'm just talking you through this. I don't expect you to like take notes. If you want to learn this program, the Tinkercad tutorials will walk you through this in a very step-by-step process, and it's really easy. So I'm just kind of telling you as I go through this what steps I'm taking. And then I can repeat that. Now that I've done that once, if I hit Command D again, it will just repeat that all the way around. So now I have kind of this repeated sphere along this cylinder. I'm going to take all of these now, and I just click and drag around all of my model, and I want to select all of the spheres. So I'm going to deselect that, and now I'm going to group all of these together so they're as one unanimous group, and then I'm going to repeat these. So I've just taken one sphere and I've duplicated it into a group, and now I'm duplicating that group, if that makes sense. So Command D, and then I'm going to bring this up, and I can rotate it. If you see right here, you can rotate it along both the horizontal and vertical axis. And I'm just going to offset it. So instead of 45 degrees, I'm going to just 22.5. So, and then I'm going to repeat this one, and we can move it up. And I might stretch my cylinder out along the Z-axis because I may want a few more. This may not be exactly the model I did before, but it's going to be close. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to move over to another program. If this was ready and I'm done, ready to print, all you have to do now is simply export this file. And when you do that, you can see there's a few formats, and the one that we like or that you'll want to use for 3D printing, and this is a universal 3D modeling format, is this STL file. And when I choose that, you can save this off. And you'll see down here it's preparing for export. So it takes a moment because it's doing it through the web. One thing I forgot to mention too is Tinkercad's funny because it comes up with these crazy names, these fun names that it creates on its own. You can always rename the file, but I'm just going to leave it. So it'll save it as epicblad.stl, and we'll save that file. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, or add to that. And so I want to switch now from Tinkercad, and we're going to jump over to another program that I haven't been using for a long time, and it's very geared towards pottery. And I think you'll like this one. And again, if you're geared towards throwing and vessel making, I think you'll really like this one. And again, this one's free and web-based. And I'm going to open a new tab on my browser. And this one is called 3dpottery.eu. And it operates a little differently. And the nice thing about this one is, again, you can export these into, you can export this STL and import it into Tinkercad. So there are things that Tinkercad will do, a lot of things that Tinkercad will do that this program can't do. And there are things that this program can do that Tinkercad won't. So between the two of these, I think combining these two processes, you can do a whole lot with it. This one is really nice visually, and you can see that everything is pretty much what you see is what you're going to get as far as your STL file. And I'm not going to go through all these settings, but you can see, so if you imagine that this vessel right here is broken up from A to G, this is the width. And so if you want to change the overall shape of this vessel, you can just start to make these sliders go. And this is kind of the point where I lose my students. When I show them this in a computer lab, they see this and it's really, you know, it's visually, it's fun, it's interesting. One thing to point out as you're modeling, you'll be able to create things in the virtual world that are not printable. And that's something to point out. And, you know, it's okay to fail. I encourage it. I think it's great to make prints that push the limitations or boundaries. We make misprints all the time just to see what happens in this situation. So oftentimes it's a learning experience as well. But the one that we're making right now is a really safe.
So Melanie's asked if, can you export from these programs into like Photoshop and Illustrator?
You can. So the newest version of Photoshop will support 3D files. And you can bring it into a layer. Photoshop and Illustrator, though, I don't think is made. I mean, you're going to make an image with those things and not a 3D form. Does that make sense?
Just want to add that you can import an SVG file into Tinkercad. So you can make your base form in Illustrator and then import it into Tinkercad.
Which is a vector graphic. So it's a vector format, if that makes sense. So if you wanted to help create form by using Illustrator or, you know, paths to help, you can do that. But I don't think Photoshop or Illustrator would be a tool that would allow you to print from, if that makes sense. But you can certainly use these programs and import, and another thing that I'll do also, if you're just wanting to create graphics, or let's say you were wanting to make a handout that explored and showed these forms with a student, you could just screenshot this as well pretty easily if you just wanted to record like different forms for reference off your computer and then bring those into Photoshop. But So one thing to point out is this overhang, and Garrett's presentation talks a little bit more about this, is you don't want to go beyond a 45-degree angle because the printer just won't be able to handle that, at least not without supports. So like on E where it goes real thin, I would probably expand that. And this is, I think this is starting to look probably more safe, very safe. I like to add some of these decorators, and you can see down here if you want to add, in addition to shrink, I think the one that I was using the other day were the arcs. And this one currently is a fairly low polygons. If you look at the horizontal and vertical segments over here, which is how many polygons that make this up, if you increase that, it's going to give you a much smoother surface. And so as far as you guys creating models or anyone, I mean, all you have to do is go to this website, and this is, you'll be up and running with this. And so let's say that, and this is very similar to some of the tests we were doing earlier this week, just to kind of print some of these wavy forms. And so if I was happy with this model, and I think it's a little down at the bottom, it may be a little too extreme on the, and we can always adjust that, but I didn't want too much of an overhang to print. So if I wanted to bring this into Tinkercad now, you can see over here, there's export and STL file as well. And we're going to save this. So there you can see are my STLs. There's the Tinkercad that I exported, and then here's the vase.
Oh, right now we can only see the tab that you have.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. I only have the open tab. So this STL has downloaded. Once you download it, it will save to whatever folder that you have. So I'm going to go back to Tinkercad, and I could actually just add that vase to this if I wanted to. So I'm going to import that STL that I created in the separate program, and I'm going to navigate on my computer to where that was saved in my downloads folder. And here we go. And so this could be now combined or added to this bottom form. Continue to manipulate and scale, move around. And so keep in mind, when we go into slicing, what it's real and what the slicing, the Kira program, and I'm going to hand this file over to Garrett, and he's going to talk you through using Kira. And every program that I've shown and talked about so far, including Kira, is absolutely free. And what Kira is going to do is take this form and translate it into a format that the 3D printer understands and enjoys and likes. So let me delete this, and I'm going to take this form right now, which, let's see, it's closer to this, and he's cut the top off a little bit, but I'm going to send this over to Garrett now and export this as an STL file. And he will open this up in Kira, which is our slicing program, and talk about how that works. And so once you have something that you've created and you've saved it as an STL, you have to take it one step further. And what the slicer does is basically creates a set of instructions called G code. And the G code will tell the extruder and the printer basically how to operate, how to function. And he's going to tell the printer right now to make one long continuous coil that goes up and up and up and follows this form. And so he's going to demystify that, and I'm going to let him speak for a moment, and I'm going to go back over to the printer. I think it's still going on my camera. I think it's already finished, and you could have you've seen one. And so we'll go through that process again after he slices this up and getting the printer set up and print one of these. One thing I want to talk about too, and we'll talk about this after he goes through the slicing. Does anybody have any questions? And I've used this program not just for ceramics. I've used it for several applications for students to design, their own dream space or to lay out a gallery show, how they would see. So Tinkercad has for an artist, it has lots of useful functions other than making pottery, but it certainly works for that as well.
That's a neat program to hear about. So
Free is always good too.
yeah, absolutely.
And I use Cinema 4D. That's a more advanced program. I've just been using and teaching that as an animation tool and for years. And so when I started 3D modeling, and it can do a whole lot more. It's super complex. It's there's a lot to it. But there's other ways to make 3D modeling programs, ZBrush, Maya. But as far as just intro and getting into 3D printing and understanding it, we like Tinkercad. All right, so he already has the file, so I'm gonna mute my screen and let Garrett take over and talk to you for a minute and take it the next step of getting this model ready for printing.
Great. Thanks,
All
Bryan.
right, can you see my screen right now?
We can, yeah.
Okay, great. So the first thing we need to do to get this sliced is to load the correct printer. So this is, if you start Kira, you'll have a blank screen like this, and you need to place the model on it. So before you do that, you need to select which printer you're going to use. And right now we're going to select 3D Plotter XL. This has been set up with a 5mm nozzle width. So it's going to print a coil that's 5mm wide. All right, so now that we've got our printer selected, we can open our file that Bryan prepared for me. And it looks like this. So right now it's pretty small. And that's what I noticed first. We need to make it bigger. So the first thing is to click on it, and you'll see on the left that there are some options over here. You can move it around using the red arrow or the different colored arrows, or you can also bring it to the middle and change the size. So right now I think we're going to go from 100% side to 200. So I'm going to put 200 in there, and it makes it twice as big. So that's a good model. I think that's the same size as we have printing right now.
And you can point out that it shows you the dimensions of your, like.
Right. So on the left where my mouse is, you see the millimeter dimensions. So that's the X, the Y, and the Z. So I always make sure that the Z isn't too high. 146 millimeters is, I don't know, 9 inches tall about. So the other thing you can do is uncheck the uniform scaling, and you can make this taller, or if I go to 100, it becomes all mushed down. And those red sections are warning you that there's too much of an overhang. So the overhang is too much in these places. So what you want to do is increase this number when you have uniform unchecked. Go back to 200, and now they become a lot smaller, the red areas. And this is what we're printing right now. Even though we have these red areas, we're assuming that the clay will bridge over and it'll create bridges where these red areas are. All right, so the next thing to do is to look at the settings for slicing. So on the right side of my screen, these 3 settings are pretty important. The line width, which is the same size as the nozzle, that's going to be 5 millimeters.
The nozzle is the coil that it's going to extrude out. Correct.
So you can change the nozzle width to anywhere from like 2 millimeters up to 7 or 8 millimeters. Those are good sizes for clay. We're using 5, which is kind of on the big side, which gives you a nice chunky big coil. When you're setting the first setting, which is layer height, you always want to make sure it's half the width of the line width. So we have it less than half, 2.2, is smaller than 2.5, which would be half. So you can go up anywhere from like maybe not 0.1, but 1 millimeter would be pretty small, all the way up to 2.5. I'm gonna leave it here at 2.2. So the next thing we'll look at is the bottom layers. Do you want this vessel to have a bottom? Do you want it to be watertight? What we said here is we want 3 bottom layers. So it will be watertight. We're not going to give it any top layers, so there will be an opening at the top. That's what the 0 means here. As we go down, we can set the print speed to tell you how fast the X and Y is going to move. And you also want to set the flow as well. The flow has been set to 40%. That's just based on some experience we've had with printing things. Actually, we probably needed to set it a little bit lower because as we started printing, we found that too much clay was coming out of the nozzle.
Explain that all of those settings on there, since it's for a range of printers, like temperature doesn't refer to anything about clay. It's
correct.
You know what I mean?
So normally when you set the firmware on a printer, it automatically switches, it turns off the temperature control. So there is a control in here that tells you what temperature to print at. And the reason it's here is because it's looking for that temperature to tell it it's ready to print. So
Hey,
right
Garrett.
now it's at 25, and it's always going to stay there. It's not going to change.
No, I mean, that's not irrelevant to the clay printer.
Well, it does need to be at 25 because it's looking for that temperature. At least if it says 0, it'll say it's not ready to print.
Right.
So we need to have it sit there.
Hey, Garrett and Bryan, are you guys going to talk later in your presentation about the clay itself that you use in this?
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to go
Perfect.
through a whole presentation on how to prepare the clay, how to load the clay into the printer.
Awesome.
Yeah, go from A to Z here. All right, so the next setting we're going to do is look at the last setting. It's most important is spiralized outer contour. So this means make the whole thing into one long coil, and we have that checked. All right, once that's you can at any time you can hit slice and see what it does. You don't have to have all these correct. You can hit slice anytime. If something's wrong, you always go back and you change things and hit slice again. That doesn't mean you have a final file, it just means here's where we are right now. So I'm gonna hit slice and it says it is done slicing. We haven't seen any change on the visualization right now. So we actually need to preview that to see a visualization of what we're gonna get. I'm clicking preview and now it's changed into one long coil, as you can see. It's important to go ahead on the right side. I'm sliding this slider down to 0. So it shows you what the first layer is going to look like. And it's going to show you each subsequent layer as well. Oh, here's the print. It just finished and it moved my camera a little bit, but luckily I caught it. So that was a surprise. All right, our print is done. And let me just, I don't know if you can see Bryan's phone, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different layers of spheres on here. Looking good. All right. On the slicer again, we're going to be sliding this slider from 0 all the way to the top of the print. And you just want to be on the lookout for any problems that are going to pop up. Right now, you see right here as
I was going to try to.
that areas we saw earlier, that's where the bottom of the print coil is not touching anything below it. So it's actually hanging in midair. So that's what you're seeing here. There's nothing to support it below. That's called an overhang, or you can also call it a bridge, where it bridges across 2 solid layers. All right, as we go up, we're going to notice more things. There's going to be more bridging right here.
Hey, Garrett.
Yeah.
Does the spiraling to the outer contours mean it will be hollow on the inside then?
That's right. Yeah. So we clicked on that option That means there won't be any infill. It'll just be the outer portion. And as you can see on the visualizer, it's showing us the hollow form. All right, so
And can you guys show again what you, because it's not showing your phone screen anymore. Can you show us the print that you just took off again?
oh yeah, can you come over here?
Yeah.
I think I hit a button. I might click something.
I can spotlight it, that one.
Actually, I can aim my laptop at it. It might.
Or just, yeah, that would be good.
How's that?
Cool.
So I just want to point out right now it means we're not done with our 3D model. I mean, you could say that it's done, but I want you to kind of poke it and show the users that it's not fully formed. It's not even dry right now.
Right. Wait. Here, hold on. Can we make the phone the spotlight for a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Be able to do it. I think it's showing my screen. Should I stop sharing that?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so you can see the phone. Oh, there's you. All right.
Okay. So here is the result of what he just showed you how to slice. And so once you have your model, the slicing tool is going to basically tell this machine, and we're going to go over this in just pretty quickly, but it basically tells this machine how to extrude this long coil of clay. Now, there's other things you can certainly, it's a set of instructions that you could tell the machine to fill this solid or to print 2 walls. But the way that we treated it was we were strictly telling it to print the exterior of this in a single coil. This is called a skirt, and it's kind of a test print that you can, or a test coil to make sure everything, the clay is extruding properly. And you can see it printed just fine, even though you can see in here the bridging that he was talking about. And this is still really, really wet. So if I wanted to do anything and let this stiffen up and continue to manipulate it or cut it apart, you can. So does that help? I don't expect you to fully walk away with getting all of the settings, but again, there was a lot of documentation on using that program and using it to create G code, which that's the tricky part, is to get your model translated into a format or a set of instructions that the printer can understand. And so, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to let Garrett finish up talking about Cura, and then I'm going to play a video of how we got the clay ready to put in this tube and kind of just narrate that. We did that earlier this week. It's a little bit of work, but it gets easier the more you do it. And there's some steps that you need to take in order to do this properly. One thing that you want to avoid, and there, if you look right here, there's just a tiny bit of air. That's really probably going to be no problem. But if you have large areas of air pockets in here, as the clay extrudes, it will create problems in your print. It can, as it pushes that air, it can blow out and cause gaps in the extrusion.
Mini explosion.
Hey, back to just a question from Melanie. Could a basic JPEG image be imported into Tinkercad and then turned into a vector image? And then the shape that they're showing, was that printed just now? That's when you guys started earlier, right?
Correct. So we started modeling that in Tinkercad, then we exported using STL format, and we took it into Cura. and we imported STL and we exported G code.
And can you import into Tinkercad and turn like a JPEG into a vector image then?
That's not Tinkercad's forte. That would be Illustrator.
Mm-hmm. I can show that.
So yeah, I think Brian's gonna load up Illustrator right now. He's gonna take a simple JPEG file or anything you can find on the web, change that into an SVG, and then import into Tinkercad. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Is your wall width variable for this?
Yeah, so your, am I on mute? Let's see. Hold on.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, you can change that in your settings in when you create the G code if you wanted the thickness of the wall, but you could also do it in the model as well. So it depends on just how you translate that from start to finish. So that's one thing you have to do is create a digital file, and there's different ways to do that. We're not going to really, you could also scan. There are ways to scan. But if you wanted to start with a pencil sketch or a hand-drawn image and get that way through Adobe Illustrator,
do you have a recommendation on what media is best to print? If you want to create a mold for casting in plaster, would it be like silicone or plastic? Do you have, or does the 3D printer for non-clay stuff, is it just one material it prints in anyway?
I didn't hear the question.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about 3D printing in clay. So we're not going to talk about molds at all. With clay, you can choose any kind of clay to put into a 3D printer. Does that make sense?
Well, I just to expand on that, I have some examples here in the lab I could show you. And so my first 3D printing projects that involved 3D printing and clay were to use a resin or a plastic printer, and not only was I creating form that I could take a mold of and cast in ceramics, so that's another, but we're focused. You can also create tools with 3D printed plastic. I've created lots of stamps and lots of textural things that you can use 3D printing for rather than just the object. And I'll grab some of those molds, and I have a small one I can show you as an example that it started as a plastic printed object. And then, so that is certainly a way that you can incorporate 3D printing as a tool into your studio practice.
Yeah, and we weren't trying to get too in detail to that. I think it was just if you guys, while you were setting up, if you had a particular media that you felt was most successful in things like your stamping tools and stuff.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what your ultimate goal is or what you're trying to achieve. And so 3D printing in the extruder as it currently stands is going to leave that lenticular artifact as it prints line by line. Even the smaller PLA or plastic printers, a lot of them still have that. And that's one of those things that I think as the technology gets better and increases, those things will go away. I think that what we're seeing right now is kind of like you would call pixelation. And I think as this process gets refined, I think I think you'll be able to date ceramic printing pretty quickly by looking at it visually and saying, oh, I can tell that was printed around the turn of the millennium because it has those thick lines. And I think as it gets better, you will be able to print very smooth objects. I mean, that's already happening. And so this technology, being able to use it as an artist, I just think of it as a tool, another tool, and using a machine to create form. And we've been doing that with a potter's wheel for a long time. So I try to think of this as not just a replacement, but just another way to expand and utilize a process in my work. Let me show you, while I am doing a screen share, I have a video that I'll pull up and I'm going to narrate on top of it. And this is just what we had to do to get the clay ready. What I do is I take a bag of commercial clay should we stop? You had a question about Illustrator and I have that pulled up so I can kind of talk through digitizing a raster image or a drawing and creating an Illustrator file to create an SVG, if you would like me to do that.
Yeah, I think if you can do that, yeah, I think quickly, I know we did have a question about that. That'd be great to see just really quick. And
Sure. For the sake of time, I'm going to pull something. One moment as I pull in here. So I'm just going to grab a nice high contrast image off of the web. And this is a raster or a JPEG, but of a duck, and this is pixel based. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use Illustrator. Has some great tools built in that will translate pixel information into vector information. If you've used Illustrator, if you're familiar with the live trace feature, it's like a one-click operation that will allow you to take this image, and I'm going to go down to image trace and then just make and expand, and you'll see that it converted it from pixel based to vector or paths. So this duck that I now have as a path, I'm going to save it off as an SVG, and you can play with the settings and adjust how it translates or traces that. But let me save this as an SVG in Illustrator. And there's all kinds of places that you can find SVG files to work with. And so I'm going to go back to Tinkercad now and import that duck as an object. All right, so create a new design. And if you import, too big, so we need to make some changes to it. So I wouldn't print this. Well, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say never, but this would probably need to be changed up a little bit if you wanted to try to 3D print this. Yeah, so there's lots of ways to begin to manipulate this, but it's just wanted to show you how you could start with Photoshop or Illustrator and start to create something that you could bring in and start 3D printing with as an entry point. But I think when we
Yeah.
teach this, or when I teach this, we start as in Tinkercad and 3D pottery as a tool to create form. But there's lots of paths that you can take to get to the destination of a digital form.
Yeah, I think it's great food for thought on the potential as our
I've been-
creative folks start to think it
Yeah.
through.
Here, I've been scanning and digitizing my son for many years now, and printing him in PLA. Like, here's his 13th print. But I have him all the way down to when he was, I've been doing it as a neat project to just kind of like document, he changes so much. If you have kids from 8 to 13 it's unbelievable. And so I've been scanning and printing him. And the scanner that I use is relatively inexpensive. It connects to an iPad, and you can scan your form. They also make one that you can use on an iPhone, and it's not, again, the scanner was, I think, a few $100s, but it does a decent job. It's not the highest resolution, but especially for something like the 3D Potter, I think it would be fine. So preparing the clay, let me stop this screen share, and I'm going to pull up a video and narrate over it, because it takes a little bit of time. What I like to do to get the clay the right consistency that the printer likes is I open a bag of commercial clay, and we're printing with Laguna B-Mix right now. I open the bag and I cut it into golf ball size cubes, if that makes sense, like golf ball size. And then I lay those out in a kind of a plastic tub, the ones that you would put underneath your bed. And I get a wet towel, completely sopping wet, and lay it over there. And then usually within 24 hours, you're pretty good. Garrett will show you the holding bucket that we use over here. If you look at my phone, you can see the B-Mix and what we take it to before we load it into the extruder. Yeah, and so the video, let's see. Of the clay preparation. Let me cue that up. They start to maybe back it up a little bit. So okay, so here's the process, and you can see here's my our clay and roughly the size. If you look on the 3D Potter website, and there's lots of great information on the manufacturer, the gentleman, and when we were selecting, or when I chose this particular If you've ever been to Ensika, I had been kind of looking at this particular printer and his printer for probably 2 or 3 years before I finally was able to write a grant, and we got one for the college. And there are others out there, but I've been really happy with this one. He's been really great and approachable. If you look on his instruction, he says to cut it in quarter and put it, but I found this works the best for me so far. And then Garrett and I kind of did this together, and you can see that he's over here, and we take it and use a paint scraper and get it nice and consistent. And then it's really just pushing and packing it in there. And you can see as I push that in there, you want to just make sure that there's no air, and you kind of fold it up over itself. One thing also that you want to keep in mind as you're printing is to just keep everything clean. You know, it is a computer and a machine, so that part of it, clay and computers don't necessarily always seem to make sense going together with a lot of dust. But when you're handling the machine, the touch screen, I always keep very meticulous about getting all the clay washed off my hands, because it can eventually cause wear and tear on the machine if you get clay where it shouldn't be. So I kind of prep this and get the clay all in the extruder, and we wash that extruder off and connect it to the machine. I'm going to speed this up. It's just, you can see it's a process. This is my least favorite part of 3D printing, I'll be honest.
So, Bryan, so
Yes.
you had shown that one cylinder that had that tiny little bit of air pocket in it.
Mhm.
What do you like? Can you resolve it if you've filled your
So you
tube
can,
there?
yeah, and you can also, if you, I don't have a pug mill in this lab, but if you have a pug mill, you can hook up a pug mill to this, and it will push it and fill it. The 3D Potter website also sells somewhat of like an extruder. That tiny little air pocket's not going to be an issue, but if you had, you want to prevent and getting air. There's nothing I think that you can really do to get that tiny one, but that is not going to be an issue when you're printing. And so you can see I'm kind of getting to the end here, and at the end you just kind of got to muscle it down through there.
I just wanted to add, if you do find an air pocket coming through the nozzle, you got to be ready with a paintbrush so you can resolve any explosions that happen. So this is not a point and click type of experience. You have to be ready to do stuff as it prints.
I was going to ask you, yeah, if you can just leave it running and go home for the night, but it sounds like no.
You cannot.
And to be honest, that was one of the biggest learning things for me, because I had been printing for years with a PLA printer with not monitored. You know, I would print, and so it was kind of in my mindset, and I don't know why, having worked with clay for so many years, why I thought that the 3D printer for clay would just work like this other one, even though I know clay and I know how persnickety it can be. But it's a process where you really are there actively with the print, helping it along as we're printing, especially on a larger print or a more complicated form. You follow it along, like he said, with both a water brush oftentimes to help layer adhesion, or a hair dryer to dry specific areas to help it support as it adds a new coil down. And so here you can see I've got the clay packed, and I'm going to flip it over, and you'll see now that this is where there's going to be quite a bit of air. You'll notice as I put this nozzle on top of this, there's a bit of air in the top. We're going to, yeah, you can.
So later in the video, we're going to use a power drill to press it out.
Yeah, there's an attachment. The drill can attach to this rod, and you can begin to manually put pressure on this threaded rod to squeeze and extrude to get all of this air out, and extrudes it down to here. And then, let's see. So any questions about getting the clay prepared? And if this is something, you know, again, I think just be ready to roll up your sleeves and trial and error, trial and error.
Yeah,
I think
do you
there's
have-
this notion that because it's a computer and because it's printing, that it should just kind of be this push button Jetsons technology. And in theory, it should be, but I find that it's really something that is very hands-on as you're working with this. It's not just set it and forget it.
Do you have to add anything to the clay besides water, like any kind of anything to help it set faster?
No, no, and we print grogless clay. I mean, you can print a clay with a grog, but and I use B-Mix regularly in my studio practice anyway. So, and I like, and I've had a lot of success with it in the printer, and it's nice because, you know, I don't see this as necessarily the end. Oftentimes I will print something and incorporate it into another object or a part, or I'll throw something, an addition, or cut it apart or manipulate it that way, because it's, you know, it's a wet form after it's done. You certainly could just stop and fire the printed object, but I can't help but try to push it and mess around with it a little bit further and see how far I can take that. Where are we at on time?
We're good. We've got just under an hour.
Okay, we're good. So that takes us up to getting the printer loaded with clay. We have our model. We've sliced our model. We put the model from our computer onto an SD card, and the SD card will go into this, the control box here. And I have it on video, but I think I'll just walk over with my phone and just kind of show you this and talk about this part of the process. So once you have the extruder attached to the printer and it's loaded with clay, the control box has a connector that plugs into the motor, the stepper motor here, and the motor drives this threaded rod down, which basically pushes this clay. This bat at the bottom here is what moves. This only moves up and down. So the motion, what creates the form, is the motion of this bat moving along these or the multi-directional wheels down at the bottom. Oh, that's true. Yeah. So it can move up and down while it's printing. So for example, this particular form that I'm holding up, you can see here, if you look closely, or let me show you on the inside there, you can see how the printer, kind of like a carousel, as the bat was going in a circle, the printer nozzle was going up and down to create this undulating coil inside.
Do you guys have, Brian, you said you got a grant for the printer. Do you remember what your cost was?
Yeah, this one I think was about $7,500.
But we're going to show a full cost breakdown of different printers, right?
Yeah.
So, you guys are great.
Yeah. So they range. I mean, Garrett just built his own. He built his from the ground up modifying a printer and adding a clay extruder. And I think he did his for a few $100s, a ceramic printer. And again, those are going to come down in price, I think, and become more affordable. But if you're wanting to get into this, I haven't looked into this, but I would imagine that somewhere in your area, there's probably a maker space that has some form of a 3D printer that has access to its members.
And you can add an extruder to a regular plastic printer too.
Yeah, just in downtown Mesa, there's a maker space there, and that's pretty much free to use. You have to take classes to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the libraries here also have 3D printers.
All right, let me take this video off, and I'm going to go walk over to the printer now that we're up to the printer. We're going to talk about just the mechanics it takes to actually start printing. And I'll take you over to the controller. Should we take a break real quick?
Yeah, if you want to take just a quick break.
Yeah, we're getting ready. We're going to set up for print. I'm going to run to the restroom real quick. And then when we come back, just give us 5 minutes and then we'll be over at the printer and walk through kind of the buttons that you press and the settings that you need to do and the things that you need to really consider when you're ready to print to get a successful print.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording then.
Okay. Now, and on Garrett's screen, he's going to show you the model as we talk through this. So if you look at his, even though we're going to be still talking through my phone right now, if you look on his screen, he'll show you the actual file that we have prepared and sliced up and gotten ready to print.
It's showing?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. They can hear me there, right? Yeah. Okay, so this is the model that we're gonna print. It's created in Tinkercad, and it's using some cylinders that have been cut at an angle. So the angle cut kind of lends itself to some extreme overhangs. So when I click preview, we're going to see that these are extreme overhangs that are going to kind of be fun to watch and could be a little bit risky as well. So this is what we're going to try, and hopefully, first we're going to do the base. It's going to do 3 base layers. The base will be kind of hard to do because the width has to match up left to right. It can't do anything else but fit right into the middle.
I just think we need to get to the printer part.
Okay, we're gonna do the printer now, and here's how we do it. I want to show the.
Yeah.
Oh, let me stop sharing there, and now we've got the.
Just for the sake of time, we're gonna go over here, and I'm gonna talk you through. So we have that model on an SD card. And we are now at can you see through my phone, this control panel? This is what I want you to be able to see.
We can, yeah.
Okay. All right, so we have initiated the print, and there's a lot of things there's settings that you can change while it's actually printing and to adjust or accommodate.
Moving real slow right now.
So it's going from home position, and we may have to adjust the nozzle height, and it takes a moment as it kind of travels down this arm right here and begins to extrude. So we may, as it begins to print, you can adjust this clamp and adjust the height of this, which will ultimately affect how the model prints. And so it's gearing up. This printer has a lot of good documentation that came with it. There's some assembly that was required, but he has very thorough step-by-step videos and test print file.
Okay, we need to.
I'm going to set this down, and we're going to adjust the height.
Might be touching a little too hard there.
Yeah, so we're going to adjust this a little bit.
Do that. Try that. I'm gonna change. Oh, can you show me what I'm doing here?
gonna change the extrude speed right now. It's not extruding as we want it to.
Okay. Wait, I think the wrong presenter screen. I think no, you're fine. Look. Is it? Oh, okay. Okay, good.
All right.
Now, as you can see, it just started extruding. And it's actually pushing out to the left and the right. It's actually wider than 5 millimeters as we want.
And so as this begins to start, one thing to keep handy is brush and some water nearby. Also, we keep, I got this extruder, and sometimes I keep the same consistency clay. And this is just from the cooking department. It's a flavor injector for like turkeys, but I keep some wet clay inside of this. That way, if I need to do a little patch while it's printing. And so when Garrett was talking about setting up your base layers, this is what it's printing right now, and it was set to 3, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's doing the first of 3 base layers. So
as we're going, I'm doing some adjustments here. So
as this print has started, he is adjusting the extrusion speed.
Add a little more. So it's at 32%. You can see the effect here. So it got from too thin over here to just thick enough. And as you can see, I'm smoothing down the layers with my wet finger. It'll help the next layers form better.
And did you say it's your bat that's actually moving, not the extrude, not the printer part?
Sorry, can you hear that?
I missed the question.
Did you say it was your bat that's moving, not the actual printer?
Right. Can you
Oh,
zoom
yeah,
out
now
a
I
little
can see
bit?
it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the set of instructions that were created in Cura, he's kind of overriding those on the actual machine here. So in Cura, it told the printer what speed, what pressure, and all of that, but you still have the ability to go in and make those adjustments on the control panel, on the controller as it's printing. And some of that will vary, based on the consistency of your clay, the model. And it's not uncommon to your first one to kind of just be learn what settings you need to, and then your subsequent models get easier once you get that dialed in. But it's pretty quick. I mean, this will print here in about, before we leave today, that form.
We can speed it up and slow it down.
Yeah. And so I may come back to this in just a minute while this is doing its thing, and switch and talk to you briefly about the other side of work that I make. And I swear one day I'm going to weave all my threads into one giant rope, but right now I do a few different things. But and you can see Garrett's doing quite a bit of just groundwork. And oftentimes I will print things without a base layer. I'll print it as an open cylindrical hollow form, and then I will add a slab of clay or attach something on the bottom, or I don't always print a bottom to the vessels or the forms that I do on the printer. All right. So while that's doing its thing, do you guys have any questions as I'm moving back over to my computer?
Could you put a slab on the bat before you actually start to print?
I missed it. I gotta.
The question was, could you actually put like a slab on the bat and then print on top of that slab? Oh, did we lose you? Oh, hey, Brian, we can't hear you. I think just the wrong video is muted.
I
Oh, there
got
you
it.
go. Yeah.
Yes, you could. You could print on top of, you might have to make some adjustments and get your layer height, but yeah, you could start printing anywhere. You could start printing midway, halfway up. You don't have to print on that bat. So if you had a thrown form, you could bring your bat over there, and then if you knew the right Z height to put your nozzle, you could print directly on top of that. And it's wet enough that I think if it was slipped and scored, I haven't done a whole lot of that. I normally go the other way where I print something and then take it over to the wheel and add it. But you could, that short answer is yes. So it's 1:30. I'll take just a few minutes, and I have a little presentation that I'll talk and answer questions about some of the pots and vessels that I make. Let's see. So give me a second. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the goons, and these start out as traditional, and I'll go down at the bottom and talk about how they're made, and then I'll talk about kind of how I arrived at making these. And I just have a few short video clips. My process starts, if you look right here, my studio is on water, so it makes like cold weather tricky to work on. I slow down a little bit, but during the warmer months, I try to throw out on this floating studio that I've created. And then once the forms are like this, then I get them ready for detailing on a potter's wheel by, throwing and trimming and then adding and then sculpting. And this one is kind of in the early stages. You can see they start as a fairly basic cylindrical form that I then sculpt and model and push around on top of. I like, they're pretty playful and I like to play. So like this video, which originally I was just messing around with different eyeballs that I could add to this particular one, kind of inspired. And here it is, further development. And so modeling and carving on top of them, and each one is uniquely created. And then from there, so here's a video that I showed you from that play or that process. This isn't a mug, but I enjoyed those eyeballs so much, and the fact that they were able to be manipulated, that I made one where the eyeballs were separate and that you could kind of change them as the user of this vessel to different arrangements or different expressions. And then I've done some that are actually wired in. So having fun and trying to get that process of playing in the final piece, and then inviting the user to also participate in that. Let's see. So I went to the University of Tennessee for undergraduate school, and then for graduate school, I went to the Ohio State. And I've been involved with kids programs from as long as I can remember, both, even as early as undergraduate school. I started teaching summer programs through the museum. And I'll talk about that. This is where I think kind of chronologically a lot of my inspiration has come from, all the way from starting out to Sesame Street and all the way to more currently some of the more obscure and kind of oddball animations that inspire my work. So I think I live in this world where I want to combine both the aspects of animation and the animated line and drawing, and combine those with my pottery. And it's been an evolution. Goons came about. I like the term goons because they're kind of goofy and kind of goony, and it's just a nice word that I can use to express all of the different range of characters that I introduce into my work. But even as a kid, I understood that cartoons and animation could create this illusion of emotion through the use and manipulation of line. Moving forward past drawing, I studied ceramics a little bit in high school, but I really got into it when I got into college. I started as a graphic design major because I had such a love and passion for image making and technology. But when I found clay in college, and there was a visiting artist, Charles Counts, who was there visiting, and I started studying with him and with my professors. And the moment I started really getting into clay, it allowed my two-dimensional drawings to take on life in a way. So here's some of the ceramic artists that definitely inspired my work at the time and continue to do so now. Robert Arneson, his humorous approach, I think his, part of the funk movement in ceramics. And I think it took me a long time to get comfortable enough to just really explore and jump in and accept that I like to make funny work or humorous work or poke fun at things. And I think that's an important part of the human experience. And I think it can definitely be an important, but I think I struggled with my pottery being able to be taken seriously because I wanted to approach it in such a whimsical and funny way. But I think once I finally arrived at that, it really kind of, I'm still exploring and investigating that. Richard Notkin, I had the opportunity early on in undergraduate school to work with him as an artist at Anderson Ranch in an intensive mold making workshop. And I just learned so much, and his sensibility about the material was so different than what I had learned up until that time. And I was in school at the 90s, so the internet just wasn't there yet. I was getting my information through Ceramics Monthly, and so this moves me into the development of the Goons. Again, I wanted to start with drawing and it being such an important part and aspect. And I think ultimately what I'm trying to do through the pots and vessels that I make is capture the same sensibility and playfulness that I do in my sketchbook and in my drawings, just in terms of handling the material and both the concept as well.
Hey, Bryan, do you like Robert Arneson? I don't know if I said that right.
Yeah, Yeah.
That's right there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, his work, his figurative work. I mean, he was just such a, I think the way that he approached clay was just, when I discovered him early on, it was like it's okay to approach work in that very humorous but in satirical oftentimes way and absurd. It just was like it gave me permission, I felt like. So this is just an example of sketches, and I do sketches both traditionally, and I also use Procreate and digital tools to make images and create images that will later become work. So this was one of the camps that I taught not too long ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago at the museum in Knoxville, and I was working with a group, and we did a vessel project where we just made face mugs, and all of them, I had such a great time, and I had been working on some things prior to that in my work that I thought were that I was happy with, but at the end of it, I looked at it and I felt like something was just missing. And after this week of the camp, these were a couple of the early, and I feel like these are maybe the original Goons that I've created. And these were just kind of fun projects that I was at the time doing with my camp group, but I don't think that I would have allowed this to enter into my personal work at the time. But at the end of that week, it just felt so good and felt so right. And I was at a point in my work where I was like, I want this more in my studio time. I want to feel happy as the work I'm making and about the work I'm making and just really enjoy it. I think I was going through this period of time where I just felt a pressure to make what I would consider serious work and what I would, but now I consider the work that I make very serious. Even though it's funny and can be slapstick and goofy at times, I still think of it very seriously. So here's kind of some of the evolution of some of the work I make. And these are some really early ones that were probably starting to happen after I did this camp. And it was such a great time. And I was like, I want to make more of these. And they just evolved from that. And so these were some early Goons, I would call them. And they're not quite to where I would consider where I'm at now, but there's some things that are happening in these that are still present in the current work today. And I was just playing around with like how to figure out how to make a nose or how to add a nose to these pots. And I was cutting apart things and wheel throwing things and adding them. Trying to figure out how I wanted to do the mouth. The earlier pieces were focused, I think, more on the character. And even though I have studied pottery and worked as a potter's apprentice and really kind of refined that, when I first started making these, I think I was skipping or bypassing or not paying enough attention to a lot of the aspects of them being functional vessels. Some of the bottoms were not, I needed to put my potter making, because now when I make them, I really want them to be, every aspect of them to be both very functional, very user-friendly, very manicured. And so as these have continued to grow and evolve and develop and figuring out different ways to express my drawings through these thrown forms, I just continue to explore texture and color palette. And I feel like each batch that I make, and I usually work this is probably about the number that I work, about 9 to 12 at a time. And this one I think is, again, was probably the first one that I really felt good about and wanted to show as an artist. After I had gone from working in the museum and making these that I thought were kind of like, they're goofy and funny, but I like them and I want to continue to explore these. And so thinking about them as characters, I wanted to get even further and start to make like a set or something that they live in or an environment. So I started to create these elaborate pedestals and these stands in these places where they could live. And so this was a piece that I showed at companion gallery in their material show that dealt with copper as a material. And so the base is wood, and I've done printed paper and all of these additions that all revolve around this drinking vessel. So here is, fast forward a little bit further, and I'm starting to just see how far I can, or not how far, but just push these and refine these even further and continue to add texture and detail and try to get the clay and the drawing and sensibility in my sketchbook to merge and become as closely united as possible. Again, pushing the expressions, playing around with the line, and I think the eyes in my work are a big part of at least the emotion that I convey. I can certainly say that I start there and work down. Whatever I start with the eyes in the piece first, and that sets the tone. And again, I think that was a lot of what the week at the camp taught me, is we laughed a lot. If you look back, if I go back to that video real quick, I was surrounded by all these girls who were there that week, and it just happened to be an all girls class, but I would go in and make sure that we were having a good time each day. And so I left that week, and it was just such a different studio experience than I had been having. And it felt, I don't know, whatever that was going on that week, I wanted to continue my studio practice. And so I've been continuing to make these ever since, and trying to push the form, and hopefully that carries all the way through to the finished piece, because once these get into the hands of the user or collector, I hope that sense of joy and playing around with these different forms translate into when they're actually using. And I think that occurs, or at least a lot of people share that kind of experience. This one is the 2 cylinders stacked. Again, I haven't made a lot of these, but this is just kind of a fun one that I made, where it's 2 cylinders, and I think I based this a little bit. Have you seen that cup? It's a snacky cup where you can put your snacks on top, and you walk around and you can drink with chicken nuggets down in the cup. There's an infomercial for it. So I think this was a little bit inspired, where you could slip a cookie in here and have your coffee in the top. And now I'm pushing it even further, where the cups are starting to take on attributes of like just a full body. Some of them have had legs, to again push that aspect of it being a character or being animated, and still retain that aspect of being a functional vessel at the same time.
Do you sell on Etsy, or do you have your own site, Bryan?
I sell through Companion Gallery. I do have my own web store, but I sell almost all my work. I sell through Companion Gallery, or at least my mugs and cups. It's just, I don't want to be in competition, and I stay so busy, and I like to be an artist. I don't want to be a shopkeeper as little as possible. I mean, I do like the aspect of selling things from time to time, because I get into the packaging, designing all parts of it appeals to me. So I do sell things on my web store, but most of my ceramic work is sold through Companion, who I have a good relationship with them, and they're in my home state. They're not too far from me. I'm actually driving there. I was supposed to drive there this week, but because of the snow, I'm going to go either later today or in the morning. This was a piece I did for invited to participate in a show, a monster show at a gallery, Mothership Gallery in Philadelphia. And the theme was just advertising monsters. And I've done it for several years, but I've always wanted to do Frankenberry. And so I chose to do him as a face jug, kind of a traditional Frankenberry face jug. Cones, that's probably a whole nother separate talk, but I do cones also as part of the part of the Goons, and I've started making them more in ceramics, but I originally have used them as just a canvas, and I like the aspect that they're just traditional traffic cones when you find them out and about, and I will oftentimes use those as if you look on my Instagram, I have a whole selection of my story highlights focused just on cones. I really like the availability of them, and I like the fact that they're kind of an extension of my pots in terms of taking this object like a pot or a cup or a traffic cone and suddenly giving it personality and making it this animated, alive object. There's a group of them finished. Here's some more recent pots or vessels or Goons that have been added with more legs, again pushing the fact that now that they have legs they can walk and their expression, and so I really want them to feel like they're alive, or they have an animated quality, or they could move. And these are all for the most part oxidized, fired at cone 5-6 range with slips and underglazes, and I'm always wanting to push my surfaces or firing techniques, and I'm in the process of building a brand new studio, so I'm hoping that this new space that I'm creating is going to allow my work to expand into new areas that haven't happened yet, but I'd look forward over the course of the next year. So again, the wheel is the starting point of this, and then I treat it kind of like like an animator. I think of myself as a potter animator sometimes, and I'm creating maybe a still image of an animation. But these are all totally functional too. They're all food safe. Most of them can be microwaved. I do use gold luster sometimes, and so you don't want to microwave those, but and another thing that has developed even further is the first ones, again, I was just kind of thinking about them as frontal and very much just this aspect of them. But as they have evolved, I've really made it a point to, and I think this is just good policy, is you have to think about or at least I think about my vessel as every single aspect of it is an opportunity to create something, and I like to create little surprises or things, so there's no point in time that you're using this, handling this, or holding this where there's not something interesting to look at. And so like here's the front of this one, and this was probably created within the last year, and here's the back of it. I like to put these medallions or these charms on the back, and originally these were created as two separate pieces, and I would use glaze to fuse this separate charm to this cup and so I would have to prop this up, and so if you would fire this in the kiln again, the glaze would get soft, and this more than likely would either slide down or completely fall off. So it's just kind of held there in place by the cooled glaze. And then here's the bottom of this piece, and even on the foot, I like to include and try to usually use that opportunity as a small canvas to add even yet another Goon for use.
How long does it take you on average for like a Goon mug like that?
Make one. Oh, it just depends on how, I mean, like maybe just the sculpting part, and I try to break it down into just like, so throwing it and trimming it is one part of it, maybe 2.5 hours, and then underglazing it another hour, 3.5 hours, maybe, give or take 4 hours. Does that sound about right? Yeah, I think 3.5, 4 hours. That can be sped up. I mean, and again, like to keep myself interested, I always approach each set with I throw an unknown element in there that I have to contend with. I am not a production potter. I'm on a journey of exploration. I feel like through these, and each batch, I want to push some aspect that I haven't in the last one. And so there's usually, I want to keep some part of them as I'm trying to figure out this part of it. And so that adds to it. But if I went back to an older one that I've already created, and so again, talking about trying to maybe capture that aspect in the work through quicker means, some of the newer ones I've actually started going directly with the drawing. This was a drawing I created in Procreate, and I've taken this drawing and printed it onto photographic decal paper that can be transferred. And so you can see, I think this one right here has been printed and is now transferred to the pot, the drawing directly through a water slide decal that is then put on a low temperature firing around cone 018. And so I think the more recent ones now are a combination of sculpted and drawn elements that are combining the more so just the drawing and the sculpting. And I think that's always been a reoccurring theme in my work, is trying to capture the joys and aspects of line drawing in my ceramic. I was just kidding about my boat studio. No one really, I hope no one thought that. I have done it before just but I don't throw out on water all the time.
I thought your boat studio was an excellent idea.
I did. I've taken it out because sometimes the water will get really choppy, and I like to try and throw that. If you've ever thrown on like waves, it does add another element to contend with. So, but I work at school, I work at home, and then I work all kinds of places. I like to keep the studio mixed up. So thank you for that. Any questions about these?
No, I think we're excited to see where we stand on our 3D printed item.
So thank you for that. Let's go over and rejoin Garrett. I'm gonna
Really cool, the Goon knife.
Yeah, I love those. I think those are amazing.
Oh, wow.
We can't hear you. I don't know if you guys can hear us, but we can't.
Okay, can you hear us
There-
now?
Now we can, yeah, thank you.
Or I could just show it like this.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So let me go mute my laptop. Okay. Okay. So we're going to rejoin Garrett, and this was the model that he was showing you. So I just wanted to point out, and here it's printing. And so the loops that you're seeing are created from an overhang that he put in the cylinder that was cut at an angle. You can see here he's just kind of in Kira, the slicer that he used. And
This
so
is the model. And then the preview.
So that was the model. That was the preview mode that shows you how the printer's going to react. And if you remember, he actually loaded the 3D Potter into it. So it's kind of a simulator in Kira. And then here we are. And this is what happened while I talked about the goons. I wish I could make goons this quick. And once the print technology gets there, then I'll be able to just print these goons and go play mini golf.
Yeah, that's really impressive how fast that.
So
that
you can
started to
see
work.
as it prints, it's doing that form, and it.
Wow.
creates a nice loop that the weight of the clay will pull that down.
Should we do some modifications to show what will happen if you increase, decrease flow?
Yeah, so we'll take this opportunity. So this is printing off of off the SD card. But he is going to come in now, and I'll just keep filming. But we're going to adjust the flow and the speed and see how that will affect the printing process. And so,
I'm gonna do the flow.
go ahead. So he's going to increase the flow.
Can you show that?
Yeah. So on the control panel.
So we're gonna decrease to say 20%. Right?
And so it's like, it's like 3D printing is like most things. It's all about time and pressure, speed and pressure. And those are the two things that you adjust on this, are the speed at which it's printing and then the pressure at which it's printing. Those two things, if you begin to adjust them, will affect how this is going to. So you can see already.
The width of the coil is good, and it's actually broken there.
Yeah, so because so if you were printing at that speed, it's really.
I'm gonna increase back to 25.
So they're
It's
broken
gonna go back,
in.
but you can see this is not really printing the way that we wanted it to because of the speed. So slowing it back down is gonna correct that.
Increasing flow.
What would happen if you ran out of clay? Like, would you pause?
So
and then
we'll go back, I'm
print
gonna go
them?
back over, and this one now, the original one that was printed, still a little bit wet, but you could take a heat gun to this and do anything that you would do to traditional pottery. This was one of the earlier mugs that I made when I got this printer it just never got finished, but you can see, this was just the pulled and attached handle to this kind of basket form. So you
Bryan.
could cut this apart. You could do all kinds of things to this. One of the projects is to give students, just everybody get this form because it prints fairly quickly, and all the students start with this and then just use that as a starting point and have them manipulate it and see how they can deconstruct this and what they can create with this 3D printed form. And I think that was one of the, I think, things that helped for students to understand how they can utilize this as a part of your work and not just just as a portion of the process and not a replacement.
Hey, Bryan, can you hear me?
We'll keep talking. You guys are welcome to stick around. How long? I don't know if we need to wrap this up for you guys or.
Can you hear me? Hello,
I'm sorry. What was that?
Bryan. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There was a question about what happens if you run out of clay mid print.
Sorry. Repeat that one more time.
What happens if you run out of clay mid print?
Try to push the
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
The piston will try to push the nozzle right down.
Yeah. So you would have to. You would have to stop the print, and I mean, it would just. You just have to start over.
Is there a way to know when you design your vessel that it's going to take this much?
Again, so.
Is there a way to know that when you design your thing, will it tell you that it's going to take exactly this much clay so you can avoid that?
I don't think, does it tell you how much material it will use?
It sure will, yeah.
Yeah, so you can, I think we can gauge, or I kind of just can tell visually like how much clay is in there. This is the XL, I mean, it holds quite a bit of clay. But there's also a point that what I have done, I don't know if it's on this screw or the other, but I kind of mark with a Sharpie or a marker, like, yeah, on this one right here, I found that don't go past this. This is the point of no return. So once it gets to this point, the extruder,
The piston. right?
piston, yeah, it doesn't want to retract very easily. So
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions from our clay group? I think it's amazing just to see the process, and you guys have done a great job in cramming a lot of information in to a short 2-hour session. So,
well, we have some additional information that we're going to share. I will send that link to you and you can distribute it to your group, but we're still refining some of it.
yeah, it's great.
But it'll be a summary and expand on a lot of the things that we talked about today.
Wonderful.
And I'll post those things when we get them. I'll post them along with the recording onto our event content page on the website.
Good. Well, I think that was fantastic, and I can't thank you enough, Bryan and Garrett, both, for just such an amazing presentation. And we hope you have a great weekend, and we can't wait to see your products. So everybody on the Clay Association, please check out Garrett and Bryan's sites, their Instagram sites. That's really cool stuff. I think, Garrett, I think on your Instagram, didn't I see like strawberry pots or something that you just had?
Yeah, I
printed recently?
just printed some greenware, and it's going to have some plants coming out of it.
Yeah, so just really neat pieces to see, you know, kind of what the future may be in clay and all of that as it becomes more available. So that's really great. And thank you so much, Bryan, for sharing the goons. I know that's kind of where we started, and you guys just took the presentation and built on it more than I even imagined when I first reached out to you. So thank you so much for that additional work and just putting so much effort and really showing our group for that. So,
No problem.
any other questions? Oh, wait, hang on. I'm sorry. We do have chats here. So, lots of thank yous. So thanks for all the information. Yeah, any other questions before? And I see we had Carly Slade. Glad to see you back. So,
Where's
And-
Carly?
so yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for having me back. Love getting to relax this time and watch Bryan sweat it out. That's great. I took a couple of funny Instagram photos of him making funny faces. The revenge is sweet.
Hey, I didn't post yours. I can go back to those.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you didn't see them after our conversation, when Carly was presenting and they talked about Oscar the cat and stuff, you know, Bryan did, you know, help out with some videos of Oscar coming out of a trash can. So very nice. So make sure you check those out. But
top 2021 events so far. That was like, wow.
It was great. So please, as always, you know, share the news with your friends. Darshna, as we mentioned, is March 20th, and it's going to show us her great jewelry practices. So we're excited about that. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our AZ Clay something, Gabrielle, our email address that I clearly don't remember, or to me directly. And if you have event suggestions, presentation suggestions, I'm always happy to hear them. So, and again, Bryan and Garrett, thank you so much for your time on a Saturday. Very, very appreciated. So, all right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. All right. Bye, everyone.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Yeah. See you in a month.